Hello, everyone. So I love ice cream. In fact, I'm addicted to it. But if I were to eat ice cream in front of you right now, I would probably be asleep on the floor in about 30 minutes, unable to be aroused. I didn't always know that ice cream did this to me. In fact, it started happening mysteriously in 2002, when I was the mother of two young daughters, 3 and 5, and always had a lot of energy and never had any trouble with fatigue. Suddenly, I found myself falling asleep while I was driving home from work. And I found myself inexplicably falling asleep while my children were playing for hours on end, almost like I had been drugged. Only to wake up terrified of where the kids were and having two young children have the run of the house without any supervision. 3 years later, I felt totally frustrated that I hadn't solved the medical mystery. I was a doctor. Why couldn't I figure this out? And so I finally went to Western medicine, to another doctor, and she confirmed what I'd already tried out, which was this differential diagnosis of apnea, allergies, depression, and anemia. And she almost argued with me that those 4 things were the only possible explanations for my mysterious sleepiness. And as I was driving away from that appointment, I didn't feel blame for her because as a Western-trained doctor myself, I had the same training of differential diagnoses to go down. But I heard a voice in my head, myself talking to myself, that maybe don't discount the allergy piece. Maybe it's not in your environment, since I had already changed my home, I had already changed my car, and anything else I could think of in terms of exposures. Maybe it's something I'm taking into my body. And I thought to myself, well, I've heard of these crazy people who have these dairy and wheat-free diets. And so I tried it, and 3 days later, I popped back to life. And it wasn't knowing that the thing that made me tired was caseinate or casein, the milk protein, that helped me change my behavior because I kept eating ice cream. I kept knocking myself out, and it took about a year of passing out from ice cream for me to really start to get a handle on the tracking of that. I went through every stage of grief, denial, bargaining, anger, all of it before I came to acceptance. So I have 3 observations about self-tracking that I wanted to share, and then 3 suggestions for each of them. The first is that self-tracking is hard. We don't know how to do it. I had more education and more knowledge as a science major who did experiments, who did lab science for many years, and a physician, and I couldn't figure out what was going on with my body. It's not something that is taught, and in fact, the only people that I think know it are the people here at this conference who are ePatients, who have broken that barrier and created that discipline between body, logic, and feedback. That needs to be scaled. The second observation is that tracking is emotional. I have a weighing scale that I hardly ever use, and I don't look at the app because at some point the news was bad. At some point I didn't like what I was seeing. And so I stopped tweeting it. If you look at my Twitter account, the very early, first couple hundred tweets are my weight, and I'm happy to share that with you. But when it got to a certain point, my unconscious mind was like, shut it down, we're not sharing this with the world anymore. And so I think what happens is that we underappreciate how self-tracking can affect us emotionally. And it typically goes in 2 negative buckets. One is, I don't like where this is going, like with my weighing scale. And the other one is, I don't like what I'm doing. And it's producing self-hatred or shame to watch myself keep eating ice cream and keep falling down. The third observation is that we, and I'm going to use a huge word here, anthropomorphize technology. Because our only relationship, machinery in our brain is other people. When you give me an iPhone and it rings, I use the same part of my brain that responds to a crying baby to this technology. And I think for those of us who build technology, we have to be mindful of the fact that the emotional quotient of the technology has yet to be added. It has yet to be discovered even. There was a wonderful YouTube video on robotics and emotion, inspired by the Pixar lamp. And one of the discoveries of this investigator at MIT was that if your technology was more of a humble servant, then it was accepted by the person. But if it was like, and I don't want to bash anybody, but I get road rage from trying to not text and instead go through Siri on my phone. And she disappoints me 4 or 5 times just trying to find a restaurant called Tender Greens. She can't get it right. And so I'm treating her as if, and I'm even calling her, notice, I'm treating her as if she is an actual human being. And because I have no other way to relate to what's going on when something interacts with me. I'm automatically going to make it a person, just like I make my dog a person, and she's not really a person. And so we underestimate how much we need to anticipate this natural tendency to do so, and more importantly, that there's a part of our brain called the intrinsic memory that is counting all of the disappointment and all of the frustration and all of the getting it wrong and all that stuff, and it's almost this sort of negative count that ultimately causes you to take it off and leave it behind. So we talk about these disengagement rates with technology, this abandonment of technology. All that is a very quick count of disappointment and frustration that causes that device or that tracking experience to be abandoned. Contrast that with my fuel band. My expectations were very low, and I knew somebody at Nike who gave this to me, so it was a gift. I didn't expect it to absolutely fix me and take me to this high-performance athlete status. I simply wanted to know, roughly speaking, how much exercise I was getting, and all I did was focus on if I had done well, then I looked at it. If I didn't do well, I didn't look at it, because I already knew the psychology of these things. And I didn't expect it to do more than it did. And so when I was busting my butt in boot camp, sweating, and it only gave me 238 calories, I gave it a little pass because I had a personal connection with it, and I also had my expectations lowered. But I think that's different than how most people approach these things. They have very high expectations of accuracy and of helping them go somewhere. And frankly, if you track something, unless you're, a high-end athlete, elite athlete, the news is going to kind of top out at some point. So then what? Where do we go? Do we go to a social experience? Do we go to a relationship enhancement with our physician and having a dialogue about these things? Well, again, going back to my first point, that person would need to be trained in how to support someone like me in a very quick way, obviously, because of the clinical visits being so short. And then I would also have to have the right attitude and the right expectations to be able to make that useful. So my suggestions, in conclusion, is that for the difficulty of self-tracking, I think that we need to find small algorithms, much like we have little tests of other kinds, that people can build up on and have an attitude of experimentation instead of goals. Goals are binary. You lose or you win. But it's the iterative approach of design that frees the mind from oppressive expectations, that can release self-tracking and the ability to self-track to a higher level. And we can be collaborative with our providers and patients and everybody who's in the system. The second thing about that is that we can have conversations that are more meaningful about something that is very static, like data, if we know how to experiment, if we know how to isolate a single variable. And confusion becomes clarity. The second suggestion is to design the emotional layer of all wearables and all tracking devices. Make them humble servants. Make them useful, and when they get it wrong, through guesswork, apologize. I've never seen a technology apologize before. Why not? I'm sorry. I messed up. I thought you were this, but you're really that. Okay, my bad. And then the third part is expectations. Right-sizing those expectations. I think it's a little bit arrogant, the way that devices have come across so far, which is, I'm going to track everything you do. We're going to go jogging with the stroller, and you're going to get better and better every day. And that is a short story. So if you want a short engagement, tell that story. If you want a long-term relationship, you have to evolve with that person. You have to start small, delight them, build on that, delight them the same way that any relationship goes. Recover from any miss or from, disconnecting, just like you would a long-distance friend. So those are my 3 suggestions, and I hope that by saying these things to this many wonderful people who have the intention to move this industry forward, that it will inspire you to take it to that next level and develop this new layer of design that I think will make self-tracking achievable, pleasurable, and, delightful for all of us. Thank you.